Welcome back to Conscious Consumption. If you are new here, welcome. I am your host, Serena Fine, and the episodes for Conscious Consumption on Awakening Airwaves come out every third Friday of the month. There are a few bonus episodes, and if you're interested in listening to more Conscious Consumption episodes, you could find it on Awakening Airwaves at Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. However, YouTube does have a playlist that you could go to where you can listen to them back to back if you choose. So, I am excited for today's episode, guys. We are going to be talking everything herbs, flowers, anything plants, really. And I have a very special guest on today. I have our own home astrologist, Arin. Arin, hello.
Hi,
Welcome.
Serena. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know I'm excited for us to talk because I know through what is it? I don't know. Was it through Instagram or through our WhatsApp? But I know you and I've talked a few times about herbs here and there. And I will comment on your stuff and all that about anytime you post about herbs because I know both of us are, fans. And so I was excited to have
Yeah.
this conversation because I'm like, I'm really curious to see like, how you work with them, your relationship and all that. So yeah, so that was part of it.
Yeah. Big,
So
big fan of plants in general. Have been my whole life, I would say.
nice. So I actually want to start there then. And I know that we kind of briefly discussed beforehand, but I did include a few questions I wanted to ask today. But I want to kind of start there with how your relationship began with plants and then kind of like at what point too, just time mark wise, and then
hmm
how the style of plants and, going into herbs and all that. So,
Yeah, I was thinking about that since you had noted it as a question. And I'm like, I don't remember a time where plants weren't a big part of my life. I think I come from my matrilineal line. My mother's side is a long line of green thumbs, I would say. My mom's maiden name is actually Green, which I think is really cute and funny and potentially synchronistic. But yeah, I remember being just, a tiny tot, and my grandfather, anytime we would go visit my grandparents, my grandpa would want to show us his plants. And it was just like sort of almost a ritual that we had to go outside and walk around the house. And he would talk about the different flowers and different plants he was growing. And, oh, these are doing so well. But these ones I noticed they like to be trimmed in the fall. And these ones I noticed they like some extra compost. And yeah, it was just always like that. And, he and my aunt and my mom were constantly sort of trading plants too. It'd be like, oh, do you want, a clump of this? It's getting overgrown
oh,
anyway. I was
nice.
thinking about dividing these
Yeah.
up. So yeah, we were constantly like moving plants around. Um, and then also growing up, my mom stayed home with us until at least I was school age anyway. Um, Actually, probably even longer because I have a younger sibling. So probably until she was school age. But yeah, I grew up in South Dakota and we didn't have a whole lot of money, but we never went hungry because my dad would hunt and fish and my mom would garden. And so we always had an abundance of fresh produce that she would eat. She did a very large vegetable and herb garden, and she would can and put things up so that we could have that all fall and winter. So I think that's always been, in the background of my life. And as soon as I sort of moved out on my own, I certainly had my own garden, whether it was, flowers, vegetables, herbs, or a combination thereof. Even when I lived like, in an apartment, I would do container gardening on my patio, and always had a ton of house plants. My mother's constantly trying to give me more. And I'm like, no, no, I have cats.
Yeah, you got to be careful
They
with some of the
just
indoor
chew on
ones.
them anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, so you have to be cautious about that. But yeah, I think that plants have always been, in the background of my life. I was thinking too, I remember a time, I think it was probably in fifth grade, and we did a science fair, like I think most kids do around that age. And for my experiment, and I think I probably did get the idea from my mom because I was probably like, what am I gonna do? I don't know what I should do. Um, but what I ended up doing was getting two identical plants, and I think they were a sort of philodendron. They were cheap little guys that I got at the plant store that were identical, and I put them um, in the same window, but then I would separate them and I would play different music to them. One I would play like classical music to
Yeah.
for like an hour a day, and the other I would play like heavy metal music to. And watched them and measured them. And yeah, it was a successful experiment because there was a noticeable
Oh
difference in
yeah.
the way that they grew. The plant didn't exactly love the heavy metal music and did not thrive nearly as much. But yeah, I was quite scientific about it. Measured the water, you each get the exact same amount of water. You sit in the same window with the same exposure and the same amount of sunlight. So the only sort of variable was the music. And I think that's probably my first encounter with like plant consciousness and realizing that they're not just, this like stationary or unconscious like thing.
Yeah.
It's not just matter that it's truly life. Um, and that, yeah, there is such a thing as an experience of being a plant, that they, have a spirit that interacts with their environment.
I love that. And I have to comment on a few things that you said because there was so
Yeah.
much going through my head as you were talking. I was getting excited. So, first of all, when you brought up your experiment, it made me think of for you to be that young and doing that. That's so funny because Dr. Masaru Emoto, that was like his whole entire like study was all around water holding memory, but then also
Mm.
the effects of things, right? And the frequency. And so, if we think of
Mhm.
that, in terms of water holding memory, but then also plants, because we talk about plants holding memory too, and how I don't know if you've ever read, I don't know if it was within the last year or what, but there was a study that they did where they were saying that plants are able to recognize us. And actually, in a way that maybe not in a way of visually or anything like that, but they're able to recognize our frequency. And so that is really something that made me think of too, because, think of something being alive, like everything around us is, it's just a matter of how you interpret and perceive it, but in a different form of us, right? But I love that plant experiment's awesome. And it just again points to frequency, it points to intention, and it points to like all these different things. And there is a noticeable difference with that. And then the other thing that you were saying that I got really excited about too is for you to have such a beautiful way of growing up around feeling the seasonal shifts, for your mom to do these canned goods to prepare for the fall, to prepare for the winter. Your father, hunting and fishing from the land, and then your mother growing, but then also going through those seasonal shifts of okay, it's starting to get colder. We need to prepare for those winter months, and this is how we do it. For you to experience that is a very lively, beautiful thing too, because not a whole lot of people have been able to experience that growing up. So I love that. Yeah, I love that. I got so excited
Yeah.
about that.
I think that kind of childhood is, unfortunately, in my opinion, becoming less and
Oh
less
yeah, for sure.
common. Yeah, I had quite a sort of feral Gen X childhood. We didn't really wear shoes in the summertime.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we sort of, ran the neighborhood and yeah.
Yeah,
Mom, I'm going out to play, end up down by the river for hours. Yeah, with no shoes on.
that's so great.
Um, but yeah, I think, and I grew up in the Midwest. Yeah. So the experiences of the changing seasons is definitely sort of ingrained
Yeah.
um, in that sort of Life, yeah. But what you said about the frequency too, I mean, and that's what music is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And then, so just for me to share a little bit about my background with plants, just kind of growing up and everything. So I grew up in the Bay Area, so Northern California. I spent a lot of time at the beach, although I wasn't where I resided. It wasn't actually Santa Cruz or anything. I did spend a lot of time in Santa Cruz, Capitola, Rio Del Mar, all those places, because they were just a hop, skip, jump over about 30 minutes. But yeah, so Santa Clara area where I grew up used to have my little playhouse that my dad had built me, and I had plants around it. And I used to love playing with snails and playing with the little I think you call them like roly polies. I don't know what their actual name is, but you know the little guys that like roll up into a ball and stuff.
I
I used
do,
to
yeah.
love playing with those and with the plants too. And I remember these plants, I think it was the jasmine actually, but they were very fragrant and they were around the edge of my playhouse. But I used to love to smell them. And I'd always try to sit down
Mhm.
on the grass and just sit where the plants were and where the snails were and everything else. And I feel like plants as a child was something that I always interacted with. So I would, even like thinking of the little daisy, do they not?
Mhm.
Does he love me not? That kind of thing. But then also in a way that was with like fragrances were always big to me. So anything that had a fragrance, I was really drawn to. And I liked spending a lot of time with. So I'd pick flowers and then just smell them nonstop. I loved when I got into my teen years, I used to go to this Hawaiian shop that was in San Jose, and they used to sell gardenia oils that you could wear as a perfume. And it was gardenia flowers that was made into a little oil. And that was my perfume. And that's what I used to wear for a lot of my teen years. And then I also wore a coconut banana one too. But just the fragrances too from the flowers and everything. And then I also used to spend a lot of time with my mom. We would have picnics at a place called the Rose Gardens. It was in Santa Clara, but the entire park was just roses and rose bushes
Mhm.
just for I don't know how big of an area, but it was an enormous space. It had to be at least 6 acres. Like it was enormous, but totally gorgeous. And I remember that was just a huge part of me being surrounded. It was a lot of flowers, really, like a lot of me being surrounded by flowers and just really enjoying not just the fragrance, the feel, but feeling like supported by them somehow, even though it was a plant. And then it was funny because when you were talking about your patio and stuff when you had your apartments, I had similar experience when I had my first apartment out on my own, where I wasn't sharing with a roommate or anything. I got this outdoor patio and I was so excited because I was on the ground level and there was some dirt. And so I did my own little, garden out there. And then I also had potted plants. But I had taken some jade from my Aunt Mary and I just was so excited to have that. And I had it for probably about 5 years. And then when I moved to Arizona, I did leave it with my mom because I was so scared it wouldn't make it here. And yeah, so I'm still adjusting to some of the plant life here as far as being able to grow stuff in my area of where I live because
Mhm.
I don't have the space to where I live at the moment, I don't have the dirt to grow in. So I have to do a lot of potted plants and, northern Phoenix area, it gets very, very hot. The sun is just very aggressive. So it's a little bit different exposure in life.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's very like my plant journey has evolved quite a bit because I feel like I've always kind of had this relationship with plants, like even to the point of like, I remember when I was younger in my teen years, even saving like just, rose buds or little flower buds and letting them dry and just having them in different places in my space in my room or whatever, whether they were from somebody or whether they were some that I picked. And then when I was up
Mhm.
in my room this morning and I told you I was trying to take notes so I could remember, all the different things of how I work with plants, I went to move something and I saw cute little mini buds there of roses. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about these two. And it's just, yeah, so it's funny, just, the journey of, plant life, because now I would say, is much different than obviously growing up. So, so with that
Hmm.
being said, I'm curious. So how do you like to and enjoy working with plants now? How is that, different from, how you grew up and everything?
Well, I would say I do garden more herbs and flowers than vegetables, though, I still think vegetable gardening is fantastic. It's just a tremendous amount of work and time consuming that I don't really have right now, and space consuming that I don't really have right now, too. But I find that herbs, so many of them are what we would think of potentially as weeds,
Yeah.
really. And my grandpa always said that anything that is growing someplace you don't want, it's a weed. That's the definition of a weed. So if you do want it there, it's not a weed.
Yeah.
The converse is true. But so many herbs are so easy to grow and will grow really readily in containers. And so I do a lot of that. And a lot of them are perennial too. So if you do put them in the ground, they will continue to come back. And now I live in Iowa, so you can do some wild harvesting too. Of course, do have to be careful about areas, making sure that you know whether or not an area has been sprayed
Oh, yeah.
um, before you go wild harvesting, and make sure you're not trespassing and things like this. But there are a number of plants and mushrooms too that grow wild around here that you can sort of go out hunting for. So I would say, yeah, it's evolved in that way. Also with technology, you can get apps that you can identify, like, I'm not sure what this is. Is this what I'm looking for? It makes it so much easier than like guessing. I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of fun integrating any more herbs into my astrological practice. When you deepen your study of astrology, as I have, you start to understand that everything in the natural world has planetary affinity or planetary sort of rulership. You were talking about roses, that's a very Venusian flower. There's a lot of correspondences with Venus there.
Mhm.
And so, I think, what we were talking about on Instagram or whatever, rooted probably in my lunar blog that I write for every new and full moon. And I always recommend a crystal ally and an herb ally to work with during the lunation. And the way I said about it is looking at, where is this lunation, for example, um, this last full moon that we just are coming off of was in Scorpio, and of course ruled by Mars. So I might pick a martial herb, or in this case, I picked black cohosh, which is a really interesting herb that has a lot to do with really sort of diving deep into the psyche, doing dream work. Um, and I felt like that really resonated with the energy of Scorpio, and especially this full moon in particular. And so that's how I sort of choose herbs to work with. And then I have a lot of fun integrating them into like lunar rituals and coming up with creative ways to use the herb. Whether some herbs are better suited for tinctures, for example, if you're going to consume them.
Yeah.
Black cohosh you can make a tea with, but it's not super tasty. So I do more recommend a tincture for that one. Some of them make excellent salves. Some of them, like dried rose petals, you can put in like a mesh bag, and in your bath is a beautiful way to enjoy roses, or in a sachet to hang in your closet or keep near your bed, and enjoy the scent. So, and there's a lot of herb use, of course, in like folk magic too, which I like to integrate as well. The old, cunning folk, and how they used herbs and herbal remedies. And yeah, I could keep going on and on
No, I love
about
it.
this
That's
problem.
perfect. And I love that you brought up some examples too of how you include that in your blog with both the crystal and the herb of working together, but then the different ways,
Yeah.
because that was something I got so excited about is when I start reading your blog, like how you work in the herbs and the crystals as well, because I love crystals as well. But herbs are just like this. I feel like herbs have kind of taken a front seat for me for the last several years, especially. I literally have looked to them for everything for, medicine. In fact, right now, I'm going through a herbal detox. We're doing a detox. My youngest and I, she gets eczema really bad, and so we've knocked out a bunch of different foods. But in addition, we're doing this detox, and we're just doing a lot of different herbs from this tincture that I got, and it has like marshmallow root and it has cilantro and
Mhm.
it has all these different things. But we're just cleansing out our systems, and it's nice because it can be a very gentle way too if you know how to do it and you know how to work with them, which I think is really important to notate too, because sometimes people will jump into stuff and it's like you don't want to screw up your system by and your gut health and everything else if you're going too crazy. But when you were talking about tinctures and just the different ways of working with them and the baths and everything, I it's funny because I was also flashing on. So my journey with working with the plants has also changed, and I find that it does. You know what? I don't really track it with astrology though. I think it's because I'm so new with astrology, but I need to start paying attention to what's going on in the planetary alignment because I notice that I just kind of go with where I'm being pulled. But I need to pay attention to some of the other stuff too, because I'm going to start doing that, Erin. When you do your post and everything, be like, okay, like where am I being pulled right now with the plants? Because I've definitely done like the crystal grid work where I'll include herbs, dried herbs on my crystal grid. And then the big one for me, I'm looking at my notes here because I made sure to write a bunch so I don't just like go off track here. But kind of my large four I'd say is I definitely do the foot baths. So I don't have a
Mhm.
bathtub. I wish I did. It's like one of the things I'm trying to manifest right now. I really want a bathtub. But so right now, for the time being, I do foot baths. And then I love, love, love dry herb teas. And I am not afraid of the earth taste. So I love me some mugwort and I will drink the mugwort all day long. I love it. Not really all day long, but you know what I mean. And then
Mhm.
I do medicine bags occasionally, not all the time, but that is something that I've done for family for their travel and then also for myself for like when I'm sleeping, having a little bag next to my pillow. And then tinctures being a big one, but I don't make my own tinctures. And then I love smoke cleansing and I love doing intentional burns. And so I have like a little, well, I guess it's not so little because it's probably about 8 inches wide, but I have a cauldron that I have, and I do my little charcoal disc, and I'll burn different, herbs based off of that for what I'm trying to draw in, and whether I'm doing a meditation or whether I'm trying to bring in a particular intention during my full moon ceremony, or whether, whatever it is, whatever my intention is at the moment.
Mhm.
So, being that you did touch on some of the more magical ways that you've worked with them too, do you have particular herbs that are your favorites to work with and why?
Yes. I did make myself some notes because I will go off the rails
Yeah,
because there's too many.
I know.
There's too many. But you mentioned marshmallow root, and that is one of my very favorites. Most herbs, a lot of them are diuretic. Um, and you drink tea and you'll just have to urinate. Like it pulls the moisture out of you. A lot of the energetics of most herbs, I would say, are warming and drying, but not marshmallow root. It is cooling and moistening. And as such, I would give its rulership to the moon, with a little bit of Venus, perhaps. But that's one thing that I really love about it is that it is moistening. It's also super easy to grow if you have a wet, marshy environment, probably where you live in Arizona. It's not going to
Too dry.
probably grow wild
Yeah.
there. But it does here in Iowa. It certainly does and can. Um, and I actually run a little choleric, and that's the other way that I, look at herbs. I can look at someone's natal astrology chart and sort of tell, do you run like, sort of what we would call phlegmatic? There are traditional temperaments in astrology and in, ancient herbalism. If you go back to like the time of like Nicholas Culpeper, for example. And I've studied some medical astrology, and that's sort of integrated in there too. But like I have Mars in the first house, for example. So I run a little hot and dry. I need these more moistening herbs in my life. And what I love to do with marshmallow root, if you take dried marshmallow root and make a cold infusion, so you can put it, in a jar, usually is what I would use, and put your nice, filtered, clean water on it. And you can add, because there isn't a whole lot of flavor to marshmallow root. So you could add like some dried rose petals, maybe some cinnamon bark, and put your water in there, put the lid on, and put it in the fridge for, say, like 8 hours or overnight. Bring it out in the morning and strain it. And then you can drink it throughout the day. And it makes a sort of mucilage, but I don't want anybody to think it's going to be gross. It's really not. It's not like super slimy or goopy or anything. But it's just very sort of smooth and moistening. And your like membranes will really sort of soak that up. So marshmallow root is really one of my favorites. It's great for nervous system depletion, dryness, overexertion. I feel like there's so much fire in the sky right now, with so many planets in Aries, that this is a great one if people are feeling burnt out, or just like overworked.
Yeah.
It's a great one to lean into. Another one of my favorites is yarrow. I
Love yarrow.
Yeah. And this is a Venus ruled herb. And again, it's really easy to grow. It's kind of weed-like. In fact, if you plant it in your garden, you have to kind of be careful because it will potentially take over and it will just sort of crawl everywhere. But it's a beautiful plant. The traditional yarrow is white, but it comes in a lot of different colors and varieties now. I even had a rainbow one once where it like bloomed in different colors. I suppose that was, like sort of genetically manipulated, but it was really pretty. But yarrow is a plant known for boundaries, protection, and containment, especially in sort of folk magic. It does make a tea. It can be a bit bitter, but it is, consuming wise, it's good for the circulatory system. It can really sort of activate your circulatory system. It can also be a very nice anti-inflammatory. I really like to put it in salves, which are really easy to make. So how I make a salve is I will take my dried herbs, again, put it in a jar. I have jars everywhere. If you get into doing things with herbs, you just end up with collections of jars. Um, and then add your oil, whatever you want to use. I like to use jojoba oil, almond oil is nice. You could even use olive oil, whatever sort of oil you want to use. I would make sure it's organic. And then let it sort of sit and steep. You can, if you want to do it faster, you can heat it up over the stove and it will help draw out, the sort of essence from your herbs. But if you aren't in a hurry, you can let it sit for like a moon cycle, for example. And if you do that, you kind of want to shake it every once in a while and sort of just agitate it up. And then you're going to drain it when you're ready to make yourself. And then you have your infused oil. And then you're going to combine that with, I use beeswax pellets. You can get organic beeswax. Um, and you just heat it up on like a double boiler, is usually what works best. And then pour it in your little jars. You can add some essential oil if you want to. I have very sensitive skin, so I tend not to do that. But if you want it to smell pretty, you can do that. But that's really all there is to it. And then you let it cool. And you can easily Google, I think, like the ratios. You don't want too much beeswax or it'll be super firm, but too little and it will be sort of soupy. So
Yeah.
you kind of want to hit in the middle. But yeah, just put it in little pots and I feel like it lasts forever. And you can put it on like bee stings, bug bites. I react really badly to like mosquito bites, and there are tons around here. So I use it for that. Eczema, like you were talking about, I feel like yarrow and plantain leaf is another one of my favorites. And I mentioned before we started recording that I have a salve that I've made with yarrow and plantain leaf. Um, and plantain is another one. Both yarrow and plantain are sort of naturally anti-inflammatory. Yarrow will also stop bleeding. So if you have minor cuts, and back in the Greek days, there's stories about the soldiers used to carry yarrow with them into the battlefield and basically stuff it in their wounds. So I obviously wouldn't recommend trying to do that, but as a field dressing, to staunch the bleeding. But so for like minor cuts, this kind of salve is excellent. Scrapes, cuts, bumps, and super safe for kids too, as like, a sort of boo-boo treatment. So
Yeah.
like, as a little ritual, oh, and now you'll feel better. And it's both actually helpful, and sort of the process of putting something on it. And plantain leaf too is another one, also Venus ruled. But again, plantain leaf is more cooling, moistening, drawing, soothing. So it's great for stings and bites because it will actually draw out. And again, super easy to grow, grows like a weed, roadsides, pathways. It will grow almost anywhere. And again, great for inflammation, irritation, and sort of soothing the nervous system. I have a lot of allergies, and I feel like plantain leaf really does something to sort of soothe if you have autoimmune issues, that your body is just like sort of over, it's gung ho, it's sort of hypervigilant, that's what autoimmune stuff is. It's like this hypervigilance of the immune system, sort of thinking it's being attacked constantly, even by itself. Um, and I feel like plantain leaf really sort of soothes that and can soothe even the nervous system in a lot of ways. So, those are some of my very favorites. I do love black cohosh too. As I mentioned, that's much more difficult to cultivate, usually grows in the woods in shaded environments and is actually ruled by Saturn. Again, it's one of the fewer cooling herbs and it's very sort of grounding for deep work. I would say it's not one to sort of be played with or to use casually. And it's not one that I would use sort of all the time. Like I feel like you can use marshmallow root like all the time and unlikely to sort of overdo it. Black cohosh, you can definitely sort of overdo it. It's like a deeper, slower teacher sort of plant spirit. And then the last one that I threw in is actually not a plant, but it's lion's mane mushroom,
Oh, yeah.
that I really love. And I would give the planetary rulership of this one to Mercury, maybe with a bit of moon support. Again, not super easy to cultivate. This is one you're probably going to buy unless you are sort of well versed in growing mushrooms. It's probably not the first mushroom. It's even a little bit more difficult than some other mushrooms to actually grow. But it grows on hardwood trees and forests naturally and can be cultivated. And of course, is you can buy it in powder form, dried powder, tincture form. or capsules, which again are going to be, filled with the powder. But it's great for cognition, and memory, and sort of alertness. I have my mom taking it. I have my son taking it. I take lion's mane pretty much every day. It's good for the immune system too. Um, yeah, and integration, cognitive resilience. It's great for your brain.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, like, I don't know, it kind of does remind me of brains sometimes.
Yeah, the way it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love mushrooms. I have never tried to grow them, but I'm always curious about it just because I've listened to different people that have studied mushrooms and then different people that have grown them, and I definitely have a respect for them. I tend
Mhm.
to be, even with like just using them in my food, I actually enjoy the taste of mushrooms. I tend to be a little bit more hands off, just because I have a lot of like fungus growth within my body. Part of the reason why I'm detoxing too is from candida.
Mm.
But yeah, I do love them though. I love and respect them because I love that there's all these unique medicinal properties to the various types of the mushrooms, but then also how they have their network of communication system. If you like dig into that, it's
Yeah.
really fascinating too.
Mhm.
And then something I wanted to comment on that you were talking about, but when you were talking about the cognitive support too. So something that I'm actually not taking it right now because of my detox, but I will be picking it back up. And I can't remember there's two names that goes by. One is more the scientific name, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but I can't. But there's a plant that I use called Bacopa, and that is also wonderful. I was using the tincture version. Now I use dried powder form, but I drop it in my drink. But that's an excellent one for cognitive support. And then
Mm.
just going back to kind of the medicinal support stuff too. One that I recently discovered, and I love how our bodies and our internal wisdom will kind of lead us places. You know what I mean? And so I had an experience where, so I do eat meat, but my journey with meat has been very on and off, like through the years, I'll say.
Same.
And it's, you know, I try to be respectful of when I'm, getting meat where it's being sourced, but also because I have a lot of mistrust with a lot of them, the mass-produced stuff that's out there in the environment. So that is to say that I have had times that I definitely could feel within my body that something is off, and this happened not too long ago. And I remember sitting on the couch with my daughter, my oldest, and I was getting like restless leg syndrome, which is not something that I typically would get. And I had been losing some hair here and there. And I was also chewing on ice like crazy, which I've never done in my life. And I was like, what is going on? And I felt like something was a little off. And so I started to kind of explore this. And everything kind of pointed to my body wasn't getting sufficient iron amounts. And so then I start looking at, okay, well, what can I do besides eating meat and besides going to, the produce and everything? What can I do as far as an actual herb for support, almost like a supplement support? And so I was looking at nettle leaf because nettle leaf
Yeah.
is a
That's what I was going to say.
wonderful, yeah.
Nettles.
So a
Mhm.
wonderful, if I could speak, wonderful plant for that, amongst other properties that it has as well. And I can't remember. There's another. So I have the tincture of the nettle leaf, but then when I take it, there's another one that starts with the A that I can't remember the name of. It has a little bit of a citrusy flavor to it when I mix it in, but I have to take the other herb with it in order for my body to absorb the nettle leaf in the way that it's meant to. And
Mm.
so this was through the discovery of, reading all my books and going through and kind of deep diving into
Mhm.
this. But I wish I could remember the name. I should have wrote it down. But these are kind of the ways that I've worked with the plants in a medicinal way. I've also I've only made a tincture once, and it was with rosemary that was being grown from my in-laws' quarters. But I used it as kind of like I did a tincture and then I also did an oil, but to use it for like the whole for my hair. So that is one way. Um, but I love
Yeah.
all the different ways that you could work with a plant because whether you're someone that maybe isn't you're not exercising the magical properties. There's so many medicinal ways to work with the plants. And then another thing I love to do is, well, and I'm kind of skipping all over here and I'm trying not to because I'm just so much is like going on in my head. I'm like, oh, this, and this.
I know. I'm thinking about a bunch of things as you're
I know.
talking too.
But I'm sorry, I have to jump back to something because I wanted to share too, because you did such a beautiful job on sharing on the salve and how you can make one. And one that I want to share about that I mentioned is working with them through bath rituals and through doing your own, in anything can become a ritual, right? We can make anything just even if our intention is just to get some damn rest. Like,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
we could just give that love to ourselves and, set it up. But I have done many little foot baths because, like I said, I don't have a bathtub, but also I've shared with others for them ways that they can work into their own bath, routine, working with the different herbs. And so, one thing that you can do, because I mentioned mugwort, I'm going to go back to it because, again, I love it.
Hmm.
Mugwort I use, and I've used with my oldest too, but it's wonderful for menstrual cramps. It's wonderful for really just relieving cramps in general. I love it. It's a very supportive plant. A lot of people don't like the flavor, I'll be honest, because it does have a little bit of a dirt taste. I don't mind it. I
Hmm.
love it. But I also love working with it for the dream state and for really
Yes.
doing dream work. That's something.
I would say it's moon ruled. Yes,
Yes, it's a
yes. Excellent for dream work and for yeah, the female reproductive system. Hmm.
yeah. And so I love mugwort. What I was going to say though is you could also use there. Okay, so something you would want to check into, and I have some books that I'll kind of share afterwards. But certain herbs you could work with in various ways, but not all herbs you could work with in all ways, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So with mugwort you can incorporate into a bath routine. And for an evening, I would say don't do it in the morning. But evening routine is wonderful, setting the intention if you're wanting to do some dream work, if you're wanting to, kind of get your body prepared to kind of turn down the mind and relax yourself. You could do a lavender and mugwort bath. Preparation for that, you could go ahead and do the herbs, boiling it, have it cool down a little, and then add that condensed form into your bathtub of, hot or warm water or whatever. And then you could also either sprinkle the dry herbs, although I wouldn't recommend unless you're really good at collecting them because you don't want to plug up your drain, which I've done
Hmm.
some funky stuff with the drain before, which I've created drain flies before because I've added too
Oh
many things
no.
and I'm like, oh my God. And they were so hard to get rid of. But anyway,
Yeah,
so
don't do that. A mesh
yes,
bag is great.
yes, mesh
Or
bag.
if you have a sieve with a handle and you're
Yes,
really going to scoop it all, but mesh bags are great. Yeah.
yes. And I would say too, with the mesh bags, just be careful. The other thing I want to mention is always looking into if you are buying the mass produced item, something that's being sold in a grocery store, you got to be careful because even tea bags have little microplastics and different things that you want to be aware of. So I always like to try to do whatever's the cleanest route. So just having that awareness. But yeah, you could, go through and do your bath. It could be as simple as that. You could also add some other elements that help you feel a little bit more relaxed because the lavender is going to really calm your system. It's going to calm your
Mhm.
mind. The mugwort's going to be a great and calming effect for your muscles, for everything, but then also helping you kind of get into that dream state. You're going to set your intention before you get in that bath. And while you're doing this whole process. And then you could always add, your candles and add some different, pieces that help you feel supported and help you feel relaxed in the moment, help you feel
Mhm.
like ready to kind of dive in. So whether it's through music, candles, crystals, having some flowers, having some different fragrant things too, because for me, like the nose is a big one. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, and then also you could always do California poppy, which is another one of my faves. So, yeah, I just wanted to
Yes.
share on that. California poppy. So I have to quickly, and I want to kind of switch gears so then can share too with the listeners. But and I was like taking a quick peek. So I started a book. I'm not very consistent with it, I'll be honest. But when I was building kind of my relationship with these different herbs, I had started with California poppy for this book that I've created. That's my own personal like grimoire, if you will. But I have the dried herbs in there, and then I include everything from the medicinal properties to the physical properties to my experience with the herbs, how I've used it. Because certain herbs, I used to smoke them too, certain herbs. I don't anymore,
Mhm.
but you could also do, different like burning on a charcoal disc type thing.
Mhm.
Like I said, but whether I've worked with them as a tea, as a bath, as a tincture, medicine bag, whatever. And then I've also included like, where they grow because even though I haven't grown a lot of these, I like to still kind of have that awareness of what environment do they grow in, what area am I kind of collecting that energy from too. So I love that. And then, so that is one way that when you're building this relationship with your plants, with your herbs, you could journal. You could have a little book where you record all these different experiences. Record, where you even where you collected the herbs from. If you're collecting out in nature, which you do need to be careful, obviously, like Arin was saying, like if the area's been sprayed or not, but then also where you're purchasing from, how it's been used that way, because everything comes back to energy and frequency of even who's handling the herbs. And I like to also look at that too. It's just the same with like when we're buying flowers at the store, like how have those been handled? Have they been sprayed? Like what are you bringing into your home? So all of that. But I would love to kind of ask you that same question, Erin, of have you had a journal? Do you have anything where you kind of record or have some reference that has kind of helped you with your process of remembering the different ways that you've worked with them?
Gosh, I think I'm terrible at journaling.
Are you?
I'm great at like self-reflection and sitting in self-reflection, I would say. I always like start journals and then fail to keep up on them. I would say honestly that's part of what I'm doing with my lunar blog, though I'm, obviously sharing it. It's public, and with other people. Um, it very much started like for me, in a way. Um, to sort of record, yeah, my ideas on how to work with herbs, and their different correspondences and their sort of, their correspondences with the present moments in time, um, and yeah, the folk magic that I like to engage with and the ritualizing of it, like you said, like ritualizing the engagement with the herbs. So that's probably, yeah, the closest thing that I have to a journal is probably my lunar blog, um, about my different like sort of herbal adventures. Yeah.
And what's funny is you said that along that same vein of things, but you were like, yeah, you don't journal as much. I would have no clue of that because you would do such beautiful journal prompts with all your blog.
I
Like the
know I'm so
reflection, I
much
know you
better at
said you're
that.
great with reflection, but it's like, oh my God, because they're so beautiful and so powerful. And every time I'm like, yes, I love this.
My
So
12th house planets are like really good at like sitting in self-reflection, but like actually writing it down, I usually fail too.
I love it.
It's funny. I know.
Funny. I don't know if it's because of I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, but I am definitely like one of those people. I have lists and lists and lists and journals and journals and you know what I mean? Like I write down every little
Mhm.
thing. Like everything's just, all over the place. Um
Yeah, see, my Virgo
so
planets are in the 12th house. So they're like, it's like very spiritual, very like sort of private, ethereal in this liminal space, where, yeah, I've lists in my head and then like things don't always get written down.
funny. I love that though. Um what was that? Okay. So I know something I had wanted to share about too. Actually, God, I feel like I've jumped around so much. So that's okay. That's okay. But you were mentioning the folk magic, and it's so funny because I definitely say I started off with a lot of books about like the essential oils and aromatherapy, that kind of thing. But then also, even though I don't garden like I would like to here, I have grown mint. But I tell you what, like I don't
Mhm.
grow mint anymore because I never get to keep it. I have a little Gila monster that constantly visits me every year. In fact, he's been eating my aloe plant, and I'm just like, dang it. But I just let him do his thing. I'm just like, stay out of the yard though, because of the kid, because they're really dangerous. So I'm like, stay
Yeah.
out of the yard. But but anyway, so I leave the aloe vera plant now is outside my little wall. But usually I've had problems with him eating my plants. And so I do have my sage plant inside the yard though, because it's up high. So, he can't get to it. But anyways, where I was going with this though is the folk magic piece, because I definitely have started off, you know, uh, with like the herbs, the essential oils, that kind of thing, way back. Especially because of my mom and the massage school and just how I grew up with the, essential oils and different things. But then I would say, God, I'm trying to even think of how long ago. Well, it's spotty because, okay, so I'm a 90s girl. Like I was a teenager in the 90s. And I definitely had like witchy moments in the 90s where I would make my own little mushroom candles and have my own little altar space and, have my dried flowers and have, these different elements and different things that I would work with that made me feel magical. And that I remember even trying to like look for and find like books on magic because this was, before the internet was what it is today, obviously. But and then that didn't come back until what's interesting is it didn't come back until probably like 2020, where I started really exploring like magic and then tapping into that. And then what does that mean to me in all these different ways, whether it's through divination tool or whether it's working with the plants in a magical way. And then it's funny because, of course, the collection of books just started stacking in my library. But the books that I did want to share today, and I was curious if you had any recommendations too. But for
Sure.
those that are looking to kind of dive into plants in a more magical way, there are a few books that I grabbed that I want to share. Okay, so I'm going to just read the titles, but a very oldie but goodie as far as the information goes, and as far as kind of the lineup of the plants, is the Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. It's by Scott Cunningham. And so that's one that I want to share. The other is Occult Botany, and it's Paul Sutter. And then another one is by Juliet Diaz, and she has this book, Plant Witchery, and this is like a really fun layout too. There's a few recipes in here, but those are some books that I want to share today as far as being able to kind of tap into that magical side to when you are in the exploration process of, learning about the plant, because obviously the relationship that you build is going to be the strongest, like teacher.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's also nice for those that like to kind of, read and, learn about them too, especially the history of them and, kind of where it all starts. And then another thing I want to share along that same vein of things, and again, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm a huge collector of decks. I love Oracle decks, love tarot decks, definitely larger library of Oracle. But Rachel White from Skeptical Shaman has a oracle deck. It's called the Totem Flower Essence deck, and it is
Mm.
absolutely amazing for working with plants. I could be a little biased too because I love her tinctures and I have like a huge collection of her tinctures. But it's really nice for getting familiar with the plants and working with them in a magical way. The other book or other two decks I want to share too is Kitchen Witch Oracle. That's a fun one because if you're ever working in your kitchen, if you're someone that likes to cook, if you're someone that likes to do simmer pots,
Hmm.
if any way that you want to like work it in, this is a fun deck for learning and for doing these different recipes and different ways to work in herbs and different things. And then the third one is the Southern Botanic Oracle. This one's by Stacy Williams, and then it's I think it's Nig. The last part, there's a hyphen there. But this is another wonderful deck. So I wanted to ask you, do you have, I don't know if you work with Oracle decks, but if you have any Oracle or Tarot decks that you would recommend that you love that are related to herbs, but then also your favorite books.
Yeah. Well, I work primarily with traditional tarot for cards and decks, which you'll also find in my lunar blog. I do tarot pulls in there also. But one way I have been working on, if you're familiar with the I Ching, this is an ancient Chinese divination system. And you can use coins. You can buy I Ching coins, and there's hexagrams. And I won't go too far into it because that's probably a whole episode on its own about the I Ching. But there's another method other than coins to use yarrow sticks or stocks. And so I started this, was it last year or the year before? And yarrow is a very difficult plant to kill, but if you harvest too many, you can. And I almost did. So be careful, but you're going to need like 50 stalks. And I would say you want them to be, a good 8 inches or so. So, and then you'll dry them. And then again, I'll let listeners sort of Google it if they're interested. But it's a very sort of structured method of picking up the stocks and rearranging them in order to get the hexagrams that then constitute your reading. So it's actually a way of, and you can read dried tea leaves. There's and geomancy, birds, sticks, rocks, anything can be divination in these ways. But it's a way, if people are interested, to really integrate plants directly into their divinatory practice that I think is really cool. And I'm working on a set for myself. But yeah, it's taking years to build. If you have a huge stand of yarrow, you could probably, do it in 1 year. But it does take quite a bit. And then books that you mentioned, I mentioned Nicholas Culpeper. I feel like he's like the OG when it comes to all things herbal. But Culpeper's Complete Herbal is an incredible source of information about all kinds of herbs, and you can get an illustrated version if you want. It's also like 99 cents on Kindle if you have a Kindle and you just want an electronic version. Matthew Wood is a very well-known and well-respected herbalist, and his book, The Practice of Traditional Western Herbalism, is absolutely fantastic and a wealth of source of information about energetics, classifications of different herbs, and their application, of course. And then another book that I really enjoyed on herbalism is called Evolutionary Herbalism by, I'm going to try and pronounce his name correctly, Saja Popham. And there's a foreword by Matthew Wood. So I believe he is a student of Matthew Wood. But he talks about really ritualizing the harvesting of herbs. So, for example, if you're going to harvest yarrow, you might do it on a Friday, which is Venus's day, at sunrise, which will be Venus's hour. And while Venus is in perhaps a place of dignity, like her exaltation in Pisces or rulership in Taurus or Libra. And then, if you're going to make a tincture, that you do it again under a specific astrological election. So he's really integrating, astrological magic with creating these herbal medicines. He also has an alchemical process where he breaks down the plant like into the salt and like the different elements and then puts them back together. So it's
Oh,
super alchemical
interesting.
and he
Yeah.
integrates this into medicine. So that's fascinating. He's fascinating. He does have a website and I can't remember what it is right now, but if you Google Saja Papa, maybe I could do it here in a minute, but um look into him. You can, buy his medicines online if people are interested. Actually going about doing all of that yourself would be very, very involved, and you need some specialized equipment to like incinerate the herbs, like, burn them away with fire. You probably need an outdoor oven, and things like that. But fascinating. And then, I did talk about folk magic quite a bit. And I think a great book for some of that is The Cunning Man's Handbook by Jim Baker. And that's a great resource, I think, for it's not only about herbs, but herbs are integrated and have been, I think, part of traditional folk magic and folk healing since the beginning of time. Herbs have been involved, but there's also a lot of different ideas about integrating folk magic into your magical practices, into your rituals, and into your life.
Yeah.
So.
I love
Yeah,
that. And
those
I
are
love that
some
you
of
share
some of my
different
favorites.
ones, such a different view too, for all the
Yeah.
different ways. It was funny because when you were talking about the yarrow in my mind, I like immediately, as soon as you said yarrow on the sticks, I kept thinking of like pickup sticks, like the old game. I don't know
It
why,
is
but
kind
I
of.
kept imagining
Yes.
them kind of like doot, doot, and I'm like, and then I was like, and when you start to explain, I'm like, that's why I'm seeing that. That's so funny. I love
Hmm.
that. Um, I wanted to also share and ask the question back to you as well, but I have a couple more, but one of the things that I was also kind of reflecting on when I was kind of taking notes for this of what I want to ask you and share about and everything else is when we have received messages from plants in ways that they ask us to work with them. And I'll give the example of that. I actually, I guess I'll give two examples of ways that I've received messages. Um, One is I kept seeing marigold in my mind's eye. I kept having marigold come up a lot. And this was, where are we at? I think it's about a year and a half now. But anyways, I kept seeing this in my mind's eye, and I'm like, what is this plant trying to tell me? And I ended up pulling a card that was related to death. And then it was like that it clicked too, because one of my decks, which I don't have out here, but has some marigold on it, the death card for the tarot. And I kept thinking of, for me at the time, I was thinking of death of a cycle because I was leaving, not losing, leaving my corporate job. So yeah, this was actually, it might have been 2 years now. But anyways, I was leaving my corporate job. And so I kept thinking, oh, a death of a cycle. That's why the marigold's, showing up is because of this. And I ended up, it was a day before my last day of work, but I ended up losing one of my dogs. This is a different dog than the one that
Hmm.
I talked about, but my dog Finny Pooh, that we ended up having to unexpectedly put down. But what was interesting about it after I had some time to kind of process and go through it, I was like, it was so interesting because I hadn't ever, marigold's not a flower that I necessarily was ever drawn to or that I ever read about. Um, it wasn't a flower that was really in my memory box, if you will. Do you know what I mean? But yet it was interesting how I kept seeing it and I was like, what, and then when I made the association, I kept thinking death of a cycle, but it was a death of a cycle in two ways, right? It
Hmm.
was the death of the cycle of what I was going through with work, but it was also the death of a cycle of, actual form of a being that was here with us. But anyways, it was really interesting to have that experience of a plant that was communicating with me. And then the other example that I want to share along that same vein of things is I was doing a meditation outside one day, and this was probably a couple years back. But I kept seeing the ocotillo in my mind's eye, and that's a plant that we have a lot of in the desert here of where I live. And another plant that I definitely saw it, but it was in a different way. Like I'd never worked with it, never looked into how to work with it. And it was interesting because I kept going, well, why am I, being shown this? Why am I being shown this? And so when I started to dive into the different properties of it, different medicinal properties, magical properties, and everything, it was really interesting because what it was showing me at the time was something that I was needing on a physical way of support medicinally. And I was like, oh, this is why this is showing up for me. So I'm curious if you've had that experience of having plants kind of show up for you in that way of, hey, like I'm here, I would love to, work with you and I'm trying to teach you this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, first of all, that's beautiful. And I actually planted some marigold seeds on Friday, on May Day.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was like, oh, how interesting. But yeah, I had forgotten altogether until you said that they do have that association with, death. And the Mexico Day of the Dead, you'll see marigolds. But anyway, yeah, I think I have had similar situations. I did go through a period where I was really attracted to yarrow. That I keep talking about yarrow today, I
I
guess.
love
Um,
it.
and actually, and then when I looked it up and I started reading about yarrow, and learning about its, yeah, association with the circulatory system, and I was actually going through a period, and I still experience this occasionally, but I don't have the best blood circulation, and I have a tendency to faint.
Okay.
Um, yeah, my blood pressure just kind of runs low, and I looked it up, and yarrow is really good for the circulatory system. And I actually made my own tincture, like a folk remedy, probably along the lines of what you did. You can use like brandy or vodka. But typically, if you're going to do it at home, you're going to use some sort of alcohol so that it's preserved. For those that you don't want alcohol in their diet, you can make a glycerate. I've never made a glycerate. I just usually will buy a glycerate, but that's another option. And that's a good option if you actually want to taste the plant, because for me anyway, with the alcohol tincture, like the alcohol's all I can taste. But anyway, I did start working with yarrow, and it really did support me. And I still, it's a condition that I sort of live with, but it really has helped. And I experience like the sort of worst symptoms of that quite a bit less now. And then was it last year or the year before? I just really felt compelled to grow calendula. And that's another one that after I grew it, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with it? And I realized that one is actually really great in a salve also. Um, and I had admittedly a difficult year last year. A calendula is so cheery.
Mm.
Um, and it just really sort of, I would say that it's Sun or Jupiter ruled, and it really, mostly Sun, and it really brightens you. It just brightens everything. It's also great for eczema, and things like that, and can be really soothing, but it's also really like mood lifting. But I think that that happens all the time. And I would say if you find yourself drawn to a specific plant or herb, research it. Look
Yeah.
it up and see what it's been used for throughout history. What applications it has and what associations it has, because it may be calling you to engage with it, for something that you're going through, whether that be physical, whether that be emotional or spiritual, or it may just like sort of have a message for you about this period of life.
Yes. I
So,
love that.
yeah,
Thank you for
beautiful.
bringing that up too, because that was something I meant to share earlier, and I don't think that I did. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Like, if you are feeling that pull, So just like with crystals, just like anything, if we're feeling that
Hmm.
pull to something, explore that. Because that's actually another way that I have purchased, I'll say purchased because I don't grow a lot of my herbs. But I've purchased a lot of herbs is actually by what am I being pulled to. And I remember the first time I ever stepped foot in this beautiful apothecary that was just, floor to ceiling on the shelves, these huge mason jars full of herbs. And it was so beautiful. It was just so like perfectly lined up and just everything that my Virgo mind really liked. But I went in there and I didn't have a list. I just went in there to kind of like feel through it. And it was interesting. All the plants that were calling to me was like what I was really needing in my life at that point. And so I had started off kind of small and I kind of built up from there. But I love going into, although I will say I love mountain rose herbs online, but
Yeah, that's a beautiful one.
yeah, it's gorgeous. I know you and I have talked about that. It's my go-to as far as if I have to purchase online. Like I get my nettle leaf there from there, my tincture, and I'll get like
Hmm.
certain herbs from there. But if I'm buying dry herbs and I can make it, to downtown, or if I make it up to a little further north where I like to go for this other shop, I really enjoy the experience of being in front of the herbs and just seeing what calls to me. And even if I don't know anything about them, if it's one that I haven't worked with before, I trust it. I bring it home and then I'll work with it because I had I don't know how long ago it was, but one store that I had stepped foot in, the catnip was calling to me. And I was like, catnip? I was like, God,
Yeah,
I thought that was one only for kitty cats. But it
no,
is
not
an
at all.
amazing herb for sleep. That's another one that's great for sleep too, for like
Very
relaxing.
calming.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
was
it's in
like,
the
that
mint family. Hmm.
yeah, I was like, that's what my system was needing was this calming herb. And so, which I'm not gonna lie, I've definitely brought some relationships together with herbs of, bringing my catnip in with the chamomile and then adding it to also like the California poppy, which I do know you have to kind of be careful with certain herbs as far as, bringing them together. But I have like mixed some different ones before just to see how I feel with them. But
Hmm.
the catnip was one that took me by surprise because I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, okay. And then I brought just a little bit, and then I ended up buying more. But I love the catnip too. But yeah, it's fun with all the different herbs and exploring kind of what you feel pulled to. Just like like I was saying, like when we have that experience with crystals, or when we have that experience with you know. Decks of cards even, or anything. I keep saying decks of cards because for me I love decks, but because of artwork too. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. I wanted to ask you too, so your experience, if any, and it could be on any level, I'm not talking about huge ceremonial work or anything, but as far as plant medicine goes, as far as have you done any journeying with particular plants that really stand out in your mind? And it could even be like what we talked about, even with the dream work state.
Hmm.
So anything
Hmm.
that stands out to you.
Yeah, I would say Black Cohosh is one of my favorites for that. When you were talking about mugwort, I think you can potentially combine these two herbs also. Like I said, Black Cohosh is really, really earthy. And it will make quite a dark tea. So it is like more potent than a lot of people prefer their tea. And so you might do a tincture. But you could tincture mugwort too and do a combined tincture, or you can drop some Black Cohosh tincture into your mugwort tea while you drink that. But it is excellent for dream work, I think, and really sort of, it also has, interesting enough, the other thing they both have in common, other than dream work, is a sort of affinity or function on the female reproductive system. And one thing I was going to mention about Black Cohosh is that it is rich in phytoestrogens.
Oh,
So it can be really great for hot flashes.
yes.
For those of us who are perimenopausal or menopausal or even postmenopausal. And so again, really excellent to consume before bed. Because if you're experiencing hot flashes at night, it can be very supportive with that. But I also feel like black cohosh really it dives deep. It really works on a very deep, like sort of subconscious level. And so that's where my mind went when you said journeying with it. But the things that it will bring you dreams. I feel like the spirit of the plant will actually bring you dreams to help you process whatever it is that you need to process. If you are working through trauma, it can be definitely a beautiful aid in that as well. Now, it's not just like going, if probably if you are processing trauma, not and immediately after trauma, you probably want something much more soothing, and black cohosh is not necessarily that. So that's why I was saying it's really sort of not a casual herb, and nor is it one that I would probably use necessarily all the time. If you do use it all the time, I would do it small doses, like energetic doses, because yeah, it can just be very, very potent. Another one though that I did work with long term is nettles, as you were saying. And that actually, stinging nettles makes a beautiful tea. Um, so if you're ever interested, you said tincture, but it makes a lovely tea too. And I feel like it's almost for anybody who's trying to quit coffee. I like, my one coffee in the morning, but for various reasons, if caffeine doesn't agree with you, I feel like nettle tea can really be a replacement because it is quite earthy. And as long as you're okay with that, but it has like a strong taste, a brownish color. So it's kind of reminiscent of coffee in that way. And boy, is it energizing. Like it will really pack you full of minerals, including iron,
Love it. Yeah.
as we said, but it's a heck of a way to start the day. It's a Mars ruled herb, which is
Oh,
not
that makes sense
surprising
then.
with its
Yeah, that
stinging,
boost.
with its stinging quality, right? It is hot and dry in its energetics, and it is quite the diuretic. So if you do drink it as a tea, especially if you drink a good amount of it, you're going to have to pee. So if you do already run hot and dry, like I do, be careful with that. Maybe limit yourself to like 1 cup a day in the morning. But if you run like cold and wet or phlegmatic and you have, a lot of mucus and things like this, nettle tea can really sort of burn it off. And I feel like that's such a safe herb to do like a very long stint with.
Yeah,
Like you could drink it every day
beautiful.
for
Yeah.
a month and really get um, really well acquainted with the spirit of that plant and also pack yourself full of minerals and vitamins in the process. It's
Yeah.
also, if you ever get your hands on fresh nettles, you can make a pesto with it.
Ooh,
Now, you have to be careful harvesting the fresh because they're stinging. Once they're
yeah.
dried, you're really okay for the most part to handle it. But yeah, the fresh ones wear gloves.
Well, when you were
But
saying,
yeah,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say in response to what you're talking about, like buying your herbs, I agree. I think buying local is always the best idea. Um, Local plants, and I feel the same about produce. Herbs are our food after all, too. They're more likely to have what we need,
Yeah.
the minerals that we need. Um, but that said, not everything is available everywhere. So yeah, like you said, mountain rose herbs, I feel like is my go-to also for like anything that doesn't grow around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love them. They're great. Plus, they have a little reward system for how often you purchase, which is nice.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say there were so many things I was thinking as you were talking that your my little dinger was going off. Dinger? That doesn't sound right. Alarm. That's what I was trying to, but happy alarm. But you've mentioned a couple times about the dryness, wetness of our being, of ourselves, of how we kind of like move through things that made me think of our doshas with Ayurveda, like if you
Yes.
ever study that. So just for listeners, in case they're kind of curious, looking into your three doshas or a combination of the three,
Yep.
because that's definitely something.
Yeah, and when I talk about temperament, it's very akin to that. So the dosha system comes to us from the East, from India, and the temperament system comes from the West, actually. So for those of us who live in the West, it's more probably part of our own actual heritage. But there's choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. So melancholic is cold and dry, phlegmatic is cold and wet. Sanguine is sort of warm and moist or hot and moist, and choleric is hot and dry.
Thank you for sharing that because I actually did not know that. So I'm only familiar with from the East because of my yoga heritage of going through my
Mhm.
yoga teacher training and just all the
Yeah,
books and everything that I learned from my teachers and mentors and everything else. So I appreciate you sharing that for those in the West and for those of us that may not be familiar, because that's also really helpful. There was something else you said that I was like, I wish I would have wrote. I was doing so good at writing stuff down, and then I kind of got lost. And I was like really enjoying what you were saying. I was trying not to
you're
put
much
it
better
down.
at writing things than I am. That's funny.
I was like, oh well, crap. Um, but oh boy,
I'll
what was
say
it?
while you're thinking that, like I mentioned, you can really tell from someone's natal astrology chart what way they sort of lean as far as temperament goes, and that's really interesting. So, um, another Eastern practice that's more common with Indian or Vedic astrologers is the practice of remediation. So they'll look at your chart and then they'll recommend, and a lot of the time with Vedic astrology, it's go pray to Saturn, wear a sapphire on this finger for Saturn, or whatever. But I think one way I integrate sort of this Eastern idea of remediation into my own practice is looking at someone's chart and sort of suggesting, like, yes, if you, like me, appear to run really hot and dry, I might bring up like this cold infusion of marshmallow root and add some, take a bath with some rose leaves, do these things to sort of soothe your nervous system and moisten um, your body. So, yeah, I guess a shameless self plug if anyone wants to come book a reading with me.
And by the way, I could
I'm
speak
happy to
from
help with that sort of thing.
yeah, and I could speak from experience with that because when we first started on the Awakening Airwaves team, I don't even think I had recorded my first episode yet. I think we were in the process of it, but I had booked a reading with you, and it was a magical reading. So much so that I even talked about it on one of the episodes, so you could go back and hear it. I think it was the when I was talking about the AI stuff.
You're so kind.
I had brought it up, but do you have any tips based off of that for people, for the listeners? As far as looking at their natal chart in particular, maybe a particular enhancement or area, or actually not even natal chart related, but any tips for kind of finding, well, we already talked about being drawn to the herbs, but as
Hmm.
far as the herbs with an alignment to what's going on astrological, like when you put your blog out for this is a perfect herb to work with during this time and why, is it based off of primarily what's going on in the sky as far as the lineup of the planets, and then just
It is, yeah. I think by temperament, like there are some herbs that are better suited to, you versus me. Um, and so if you're like looking at my lunar blog and you think, well, I've tried that herb and I don't really like it. It's not me. Like that's totally fine. It might just not sort of agree with your temperament. And there are always more options, obviously, than just one, but that is how I pick the herbs for my blog is by looking at the energy of the sky of the moment and then specifically for that lunation, so that new or full moon, the rulership and what's going on and like sort of what I think we are needing support with energetically. And that's how I um, choose the herbs. And sometimes things do just sort of come to me or I just feel called. That totally happens also, but I do try and sort of match it with the energetics of the moment. Um, And I think, I also try and pick really safe and pretty
Yeah.
common herbs, that as long as you're working with it, just a little bit and perhaps, for a week or something around the new moon is unlikely to cause contradictions. Like always, trust yourself, talk to your doctor if you have concerns about chronic health issues that you might have. There are some herbs that will elevate blood pressure. So, if for those of our listeners that maybe already have high blood pressure, they would want to look into that and be cautious. But, especially, yeah, the safer herbs, if you take what I would call an energetic dose. So, just a sort of small amount, it's unlikely to cause contradiction. So that's sort of how
Yeah.
I try and choose those. But know yourself. And I think, for a lot of us, you can tell from your own natal chart, even if you know your rising sign, you can say, because the rising sign is very much about the body, the ascendant degree and sign. So, like air tends to be warm and moist and more sanguine. Fire, obviously, hot and dry and more choleric. Earth is more cold and dry and melancholic. And then water, cold and wet and more phlegmatic. So, that might give you an idea and a starting point as far as how to work with your own temperament. But yeah, I think ultimately, like we were talking about, if you feel pulled or called towards a certain herb, I would trust that. I think
Yeah.
that's your intuition speaking and potentially the spirit of the plant sort of calling you. Yeah, from my point of view, like we're all part of this oneness of the universe. So that doesn't seem so wild to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Something you were saying too, just going back to the ceremonial work or working with a very intentional way with journeying that I want to share on too is well, two parts to this, but one is more of like a just a safety flag, if you will, that I'm kind of holding up for people. But because I have talked to people before that have either known somebody or they themselves have been interested in doing plant ceremonial work. And I'm not talking about kind of these, what I would like to kind of, I don't want to say mellow plants because I feel like mellow plants then you're kind of not giving credit to the beauty of the plant, like the mugwort and these different plants. But some that are interested in doing like these San Pedro or ayahuasca
Hmm.
journeys and that kind of thing. But because I have talked to people that have planned trips going to different places, or I've known through somebody of them going to places where they're going to go experience that. And
Hmm.
so just what I was going to say around it is if it's something that you are feeling called to, really looking at to not just the plant and where the plant's coming from, like if you're traveling to somewhere like Costa Rica or whatever to do this work, but then if you're going to a resort, that is a very, very different experience. Who's running that experience? Versus if you're in a more communal experience of people that have really grown up on the land, have worked with the plants, are familiar with them, are very native to them, and have that kind of inner wisdom with them, with the plant work. But then on the other kind of side of this too, with doing journey work on a way that you could do it, since we were talking about dreams, and that's something that I keep bringing up, but another plant that I was thinking of that I had wrote down is I don't know if you've ever worked with, but blue lotus. And blue
Hmm.
lotus is another one that's a wonderful, like prophetic dream type psychic, plant to kind of, enhance that for that third eye, but it's also very grounding. There are two different kinds of blue lotus. Typically, the ones that you will find out and available to you is the Asian grown blue lotus. But there is like the actual Egyptian grown. And there's a gentleman actually on Instagram. I had started following. What is his name? It's Blue Lotus Priest. But anyways, he talks a lot about Blue Lotus, and it's interesting because I had already worked with the plant as far as like making teas and then using them for some of the work that I've done. And when I came across them, it was really interesting. I'm like, oh, this is, anyways, point is that there are some different types of herbs to work with for dream work, depending on what it is that you're wanting to achieve in your dream work state, whether you are looking for more of prophetic dreams and, tapping into something that you're trying to kind of, what am I trying to say? For if you're looking for clarity on, is what I'm saying there. Or if you're looking to do a little bit more of traveling. So,
Hmm.
whether, whatever it is, it could be really fun to explore and to look at. And then one other thing I wanted to just share really quick, and you've shared so much, and I'm so excited about all of this. But something I discovered recently, and I want to share this because you had mentioned so many wonderful things for women going through, menopause and perimenopause, which I am in that stage. So I appreciate that share. I was like, oh, well, I need
Yeah, I
to
think we're right about the same age. Yeah.
I was like, yay. But something that I've been, kind of working with, I'll say, is my joints are not what they used to be. And especially since I haven't been moving around and doing my yoga like I used to. And so I was really like waking up with like my hips hurting and just, everything just really being uncomfortable. And I recently implemented a turmeric routine in the morning where I take turmeric, actual turmeric root. I wear a glove now because I was staining my hand for the longest time. And so I'd have this like like right hand that was yellow from holding the turmeric. And finally I was like, I just need to get some gloves. But anyway, so I actually shave off the skin there with a peeler. And then I shave off the actual turmeric itself into a little pot. And then I put my filtered water in there and then I boil it and then I make my own little turmeric tea and then I add the black peppercorn because that helps with the body absorbing the turmeric. But it has been amazing. So anybody with joint problems out there or anything, joint concerns, it's a wonderful way to implement some support for your joints. And so,
Excellent. Yeah, it's great anti-inflammatory.
yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
Nice.
But I wanted to ask you if you had any last thoughts of anything that you would love to share or add as far as leaving our listeners with?
Oh gosh, we've covered so much. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess I would say, have fun. Have
Yeah.
fun with herbs. I think like we said, there are some safety concerns. I don't want to act like there's none, but I want to encourage people to have the freedom to trust their intuition around plants and to engage with them in the way that feels right for you and have fun with it. Even if it's something that you find out you don't want to take internally, there are so many other ways to utilize it, putting it on your altar, doing like a smoke blend, like you said, or like an incense blend. That is the origin of incense, right there is like burning plants. So I think there's a lot of great ways to integrate herbs into your other sort of divinatory or ritualistic practices. Yeah, have fun and maybe leave us a comment about your most favorite use of herbs, what herbs you love, and how you love to use them.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I definitely want to hear from everyone because I am curious because I love hearing what plants people work with and what their experiences are with them and what their go-tos are. So I love that. Thank you so much, Erin. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun too. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me.
Yay. And thank you to all the listeners. So drop comments down below if you're not following. Why not? Awakening Airwaves is awesome. And we have so many different beautiful episodes, including Astrology with Arin and all her beautiful shares that she goes through with what's going on in the planetary alignment. And then along with other beautiful podcast episodes in here. So thank you all for showing up here today and leave comments below. Let us know what you thought of the episode and your experiences with everything. Thanks.